Welcome everybody to the new year. Turns out it's looking pretty much the same as the old year, and we're back in lockdown again here in the UK. So for season 2 of the podcast, we will be starting with one of our Zoom socially distanced special lockdown podcast episodes.
It's pretty much as you were, another podcast of wonder. People keep wondering why we do it.
So I think we need to get the important things out of the way, Pete, and that is that since we're doing a lockdown podcast, it means I can have a glass of whiskey.
What are you drinking today, then?
Well, you'll be pleased to know that I'm just going with a bit of wild turkey today. It's straight up neat bit of bourbon whiskey. It is the middle of the afternoon here. Usually when we do the lockdown podcast, we do it of an evening, but no, it's the middle of the afternoon. But it's evening somewhere in the world, Pete, so it's okay.
So you're not messing about today. People might notice in my background, if they've got really sharp eyes, there is some Hortus gin there. It's not mine. I am, as you know, abstaining from alcohol, so I have got a bottle of Pepsi Max to sustain me this afternoon.
Delicious. I must confess, I actually do have a glass of Pepsi Max as well next to me. It is the drink of choice, if you like,
it's
Pepsi
wonderful.
Max. That is.
Yeah. We're not sponsored by Pepsi, but we probably should be the amount we drink.
If anybody from Pepsi is watching, we'd quite like to be sponsored by Pepsi.
Yeah, this is the face of the new generation, apparently.
It's not the hairline of the new generation, Pete. Both you and I seem to be boasting a lot more forehead than we used to.
We're receding faster than most of the UK coastline, it has to be said.
It's very true. Hey,
but no one's built any bungalows on our forehead, so that's good.
I'm pleased to hear it. Look, this is a tech podcast. We need to talk tech. And today we're going to be talking about Apple products in 2021. We have delved the depths of the rumour mills, and we've come up with some things that we think are reasonable expectations. But before we get into that, you might remember that last year, of course, we had the new iPhones released, and we spoke for a while about the iPhone camera. And I just wanted to talk about a new camera on the market, Pete.
Do people buy cameras anymore?
Yeah, many people buy cameras.
Okay.
I'd like you to, if you will, just imagine a scenario, Pete.
Okay.
You're out and about taking photographs, and what you want to do with your photograph is edit it straight away and get it up onto social media.
I want to do that all the time.
I imagine you are the type of person that is always in that situation, and you're probably thinking to yourself, if only there was a product that could take a reasonably good quality photo, allow me to edit it in real time and then post it straight to social media. If only such a product existed.
Surely nothing like that exists.
Well, let me tell you about the new Zeiss ZX1, or ZX1 if you're of a North American persuasion. Zeiss, of course, make fantastic lenses, and this camera comes complete with a very nice Zeiss lens on it. It's full frame, very high megapixels. Quite a niche camera. It's not an interchangeable lens or anything like that. But what they've done is, on the back of the camera, they've got a large touchscreen that runs Android. Now, I say large touchscreen, not as large as the one that's on your phone. And I say it runs Android, and you can do stuff with it, which means that you can run Lightroom Mobile. So the idea is that you take your photo, you go into Lightroom Mobile, and if you haven't subscribed to Lightroom Mobile, obviously you'll only get basic functionality. You'll need to pay the monthly subscription, obviously.
Just to help Adobe out.
That's it. So you go into Lightroom, which is a lot like your phone, Lightroom Mobile on your phone, only with a smaller
because
screen.
It's running Android.
Yeah, but with a smaller screen, and not as fast as your phone, sort of more laggy. Okay, so just imagine that, and then you can edit your photo on that small screen using Lightroom. But bear in mind, it's like a 37 megapixel raw photo, but you can edit that on your little touch screen on the back of the camera, and then shoot it straight up to the internet.
Okay, so that sounds like a really good camera, bad phone. So a camera phone, but with with a kind of a Frankenstein phone of an amazing lens and then a laggy operating system and screen.
It's a bit odd. I got to be honest. I watched a video about it and I was a bit bemused because I put it to you that a device already exists that can achieve all of these functions, Pete.
Yeah, it's called an iPhone.
Right. And it's been around a long time and it's really rather good at doing what it does. Because when you're taking a photo for social media, at the end of the day, it's going to be viewed on social media at some incredibly low pixel definition. You don't need a full frame sensor. You don't need a 37 megapixel source image.
Is that what it's got in it? It's got a full frame sensor in it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it probably runs really hot then as well.
I don't know. I find it confusing. See, I like to take photos, back in the days when we could go places and see things and take photos of things. And I would either take my phone or my iPad and wirelessly transmit or copy the files off. And I would make edits using a proper piece of software on a big screen if you take the iPad Pro, and then fire it straight up on a data connection. So I can. That workflow is almost as quick when you take into account the working with the tiny laggy screen business.
Yeah.
So I just wonder who Zeiss thinks this is for.
Who's it for? Who's it for? Probably, I'm going to go out on a limb at the beginning of 2021 and risk upsetting some people by saying probably someone pretentious.
Yeah, although if you're pretentious, and again, I'm risking upsetting people here, you'd probably buy a Leica Q2 and you can have that for less money.
Oh, okay. So yeah, let's talk about that then. So I'm guessing because what you're basically describing is a camera phone, but with just a ridiculously big camera on it and a slightly inferior smartphone component
Without any phone functionality.
Oh yeah, that minor point. Go on then. How much for this ZX1?
Well, why don't you guess? No, you're wrong. $6,000.
Oh, what now?
$6,000.
6,000 American dollars.
Indeed, yeah. So either I've completely missed the point of this camera, or Zeiss has completely missed the point of the marketplace. I really don't know who it's for. And
that sounds like an expensive mistake waiting to happen. When did that come out?
Just recently.
It's just come out. Okay, yeah. That's probably why I haven't bothered to look it up yet. Then.
I think there are some people who really like the idea of it, but I don't personally get it. If you want if you want to buy into a brand, and that does exist within the photography world, people like to have a Leica, to have that red dot on the front of the camera. Well, you can have a Leica Q2 for $5,000, which is still vastly overpriced compared to other cameras.
It's a snip at 6,000 compared to 6,000. It's a snip.
Even if it has an amazing lens on it and all of the rest of it and a great sensor, it's the gimmicky stuff doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. And I think it just goes to show, perhaps contrary to what we were actually saying last year about the iPhone, but actually the iPhone is a fairly compelling camera for that use case, isn't it? Where you need to get stuff up quickly to social media and that sort of thing.
As much as it pains me to say it, it is. And that's crazy.
So let's move on.
Yes.
Let's talk about this year. I was almost said next year then, but we are actually in this year, 2021. And we're expecting fairly imminent Apple announcements. I think it's fair to say. Some people have even said January, but I'm not convinced about that.
Well, you never can tell with Apple. They do like to keep us on our toes, but March seems to be the consensus, doesn't it?
Yeah. And so we think an event in March where we will see
new 10.2-inch iPad.
Okay, that'd be good. I mean, we're talking about the entry level iPad here.
Yeah. So something thinner and lighter. Interestingly, still has Touch ID and Lightning connector at that price point, though.
Well, that's what the rumours are saying. I think Apple are deliberately keeping it on Lightning to provide an upgrade path to the Air and the Pros. I wonder, though, if the Touch ID might find its way into the power button like it is on the iPad Air. instead of being on the home screen button, and then that would allow possibly a larger screen. Just a thought.
Yeah, that would be a logical progression, wouldn't it? And it would give the sort of the midway point again between that and Face ID.
But might take away some of the market of the iPad Air. So not sure about that. Who knows?
Have to wait and see. What I am interested in is some new iPad Pro models coming up, because one of the things we noticed is that the iPad Air is really quite an amazing device, and in a lot of respects, you would at this point you would choose one of those over an iPad Pro. We obviously both run iPad Pros, and so we felt a little bit shortchanged by that. But new ones coming as well with a mini LED display and a much faster chip.
Yeah, the mini LED display is interesting. I don't think it's necessary. I've never been sat using the display on my iPad Pro thinking this is a bit substandard. Nonetheless, Apple is moving this way. So, put simply, you should expect to see better response times from the display, better contrast rates, a better overall experience. Will most people notice the difference? Probably
not.
I struggle to tell the difference really between the basic LCD and the LED models. They're so good. They're all so good. Quite excited though by the idea of a faster chip, and I'll say why. I mean, I'm by no means an Apple fanboy, as regulars of the channel will know. I do like Mac OS. I like Mac OS. I don't necessarily like the whole Mac range, but I certainly like the operating system. And I can take or leave the phones, frankly. It's better than Android, so in my humble opinion, folks, so that's what I prefer to use. I'm not really fussed about it. I got the Apple Watch. I'm pretty unfussed with that as well. Not excited by the idea of Apple headphones and audio and all the rest of it. So for me, the important products in the Apple lineup are the operating system and the iPad Pro. And the reason why I love the iPad Pro, it is the computer on which I probably spend most of my time, because it's so easy to use, it's intuitive, it can do heavyweight work if you want it to. We use the Logitech keyboard cover with ours, and you can work on a spreadsheet, you can with the pencil, you can edit photographs like we were just talking about, use Affinity Photo on my iPad Pro. That's great. One of my sons has started his own YouTube channel, and he's editing everything in LumaFusion on his iPad.
Fair play.
Yeah.
And why not? Because it is, as you say, it's a great machine, it's powerful, and it's the next generation of computing in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, to certain extents, I could see myself in the future not bothering with a laptop, having a powerful desktop and an iPad. Do you really need anything more? Well,
no, there's definitely some convergence coming. I mean, you are getting to that point. I am still not I'm not quite where you are yet. In that, I suppose I don't have a powerful desktop. I literally run my two laptops at the moment, because I've got the MacBook Pro 16 and still got the M1 MacBook Air, which I'm playing with for various things. That's coming to an end. I don't have a desktop, so I suppose it's the same thing, though. I have one proper computer, if you like. Mine happens to just be a powerful laptop and my iPad. I don't feel like I need anything else. I do like having a keyboard and a mouse from time to time, though. There are times when I find that gets in the way on the iPad, but it's only for specific tasks. There's certain things I prefer a proper traditional machine for, but your mileage may vary on that.
Yeah,
depends what you're doing.
I'd agree with that. I'd rather, if I'm working on Excel or something, I'd rather be using a desktop operating system. But the fact that I can do it on my iPad means that I do it. Quite often I will update stuff. We've got a fairly heavyweight spreadsheet that we keep a lot of our company data in. I frequently update that on my iPad Pro. It doesn't slow down when it's drawing the graphs or anything like that. It's a great experience. So in truth, I started all of this long-winded rant about how great iPads are by saying I'm looking forward to a faster chip. But truth is, I don't need a faster chip. The one that's in there is already brilliant.
No, but Apple will make you think you do need a faster chip, because when it comes out, we're one generation behind the current Pros anyway, as it stands, aren't we? So, Apple will just make you think that you're missing out, which is genius marketing, but also very annoying. Don't fall for it.
Well, obviously they've got the M1 and the M1 and the A13, is it? Or it's the A12X, isn't it?
Yeah.
A12Z. I can't remember now. I lose track of all of these things. But the iPad chips are slightly different to the Apple Silicon that's in the Macs. But we are expecting some of that to cross over. So whilst there are differences on the Silicon, fundamentally, it is the same chip. It's the same underpinnings. So, it's there's the opportunity to have the additional performance cores. So I think at the moment the iPad Pro has the 4 efficiency cores and 4 performance cores. I think I'm right in saying that.
Sounds about right.
So getting the extra 2 performance cores, that would be pretty amazing. And the graphics on the iPad is somewhere around half the performance of what's on the M1. So I'd expect to see them bump that up as well. And, for mobile gaming and the type of games that are getting released on the iPad, not that I play games on the iPad, but some people do, that's going to be really, really good. And, you can't beat having more performance. That's a good thing, especially for those use cases like we spoke about, photographers, who are using an iPad Pro in the field. Yeah.
Instead of a Zeiss ZX1, for example.
Yeah.
So very excited about iPad Pro because that is probably, of the iPad lineup, that's the ones we would go for. Not saying we will, but we might. Is there anything else coming out at that March event that we suspect is going to happen?
Well, the Mini hasn't been updated since 2019.
Has it been that long?
Yeah, so I'm thinking an iPad Mini, and I wondered whether they might take the opportunity to make it like a smaller version of the Air, but I don't. That's not what the rumours are saying, because the rumours are saying still have a home button with Touch ID, but possibly slimmer bezels so they can get a bigger screen in. I think it's 7.9 inches at the moment, so that'll bump it to like
sort of 8.4, something like that.
Something like that.
Mm. And they could still go for the Touch ID on the side, couldn't they?
They could do that.
Which again, aesthetically, it's beautiful. I much prefer that.
Yeah, I would rather have Touch ID on my phone and Face ID on my iPad.
Yeah. Particularly at the moment with masks and not being able to show your face out in public.
Yeah.
When you want to pay for things or log into your whatever.
That of course relies on you being able to go out somewhere to pay for something in the first place.
Well, you still have to go shopping for food.
Oh yeah.
Because you can't get a delivery for love nor money around here.
You can't. It's very difficult. Anyway, some people have it much worse than us, Pete. So let's move on.
Yeah, not complaining.
Another possibility for this event is the smaller iMac. And this is interesting. Now, let me tell you what I think Apple will do with the iMac.
Go on.
I think the smaller one will get the M1, as it is already, but possibly with an improved GPU, because that is, I don't want to get too much into this because we're going to talk more about M1 next week, but the weak point of the M1 is still the GPU.
Yeah.
And there's talk that Apple are obviously working on more powerful versions, but there is a rumour that the iMac could get a better GPU in it, perhaps with a few more cores. I think that would make sense for an iMac. And whether or not they change the design, I mean, the design is long overdue a refresh. Whether that comes right now is another question. They might reuse the existing chassis.
I really hope so, but they may not. They may keep the M1s in the existing chassis and then use the upcoming chips, which we'll talk about in a minute, for the new form factors that I'm desperate for. I don't know why I'm desperate for. There's nothing wrong with what they've got at the moment, but we just like new, don't we?
We do. We all like it. Well, I think they would redesign it, and that would, if they reduce the size of the bezels, and I have to say the bezels never particularly bothered me, but they do make it look dated now when you put it up next to other machines. Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're comparing it to the aforementioned iPad Pro
or the XDR displays, they are starting to show their age now, which is a shame because they are a classic design, and I'm very fond of the iMac design.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at my Dell 32-inch 4K screen here on my desk, and the bezels are no more than 10 mil around. On such a large screen, that's a tiny bezel. If you had an iMac in place with its chunky bezels, it does look a little bit dated. So I think they'll probably change that, and if they did, then they could get a 23-inch screen in, maybe even a 24-inch screen.
Yep.
And that would be a nice step up. That could, it could be a 4K screen. There's no reason why not.
Yeah.
Whether they'll do that, who knows?
Isn't there talk of potentially Face ID if they move this to Apple Silicon?
Well, they'll have all of the kit on board to do it. They're constantly getting lambasted for the quality of their webcam, so I don't see why they wouldn't. Would make sense as well. Would make sense to do that. That said, the laptops didn't get it, did they?
No, they didn't. And again, when you're talking about where you want Face ID, on being able to sit down in front of your computer and it just log you in, brilliant. I'm with you on that. That's where the application makes most sense from my point of view.
So we could be wrong about the iMac coming in March, but it would make sense for the smaller one to come out fairly soonish. But if not, then perhaps at WWDC. But before we get to WWDC, it seems that there's also stuff that might drop in April, and this might be just quiet release rather than at an event.
Yeah.
So leaks from Chinese suppliers, basically. A couple of products we think possibly might come.
Yeah, I've looked at this AirPod Pro 2nd generation.
What's your level of excitement about AirPod Pro, Pete? Yeah. Well, I think that sums it up quite eloquently. Yeah. I feel similarly. I struggle with in-ear stuff. I prefer over-the-ear headphones, if I'm honest. But
I have got some AirPods in at the moment. They're the first generation AirPods, and they're great.
We're going to have to explain that now, because everyone can see. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that Pete is quite clearly wearing some AKG over-the-ear headphones, and yet he's pointing to his ears and saying, "I've got AirPods in." So
I have actually got AirPods in underneath my AKGs. There you go. And that's so I can hear Dave on our call, because we're on stupid lockdown again, so we're having to do this remotely. But I've also got the AKG so I can hear myself on the podcast and make sure that I'm lulling you with my dulcet tones.
Thank you.
But yeah, I use the AirPods for that, but there's nothing wrong with what they are. And I've not used the AirPod Pro, so they might be amazing.
Well,
then we're on to AirPod Pro 2nd generation as well.
Well, they have the silicon cups. So if, like me, you have asymmetrical ears, in other words, my ear canals are not the same shape on both sides, I can't wear the standard AirPods. They'll just fall out.
Mine do fall out from time to time, particularly when I'm at the gym, and if I'm lifting particularly heavy weights and if I'm straining a lot, I'm concluding that my head shape changes, because sometimes they just drop out when I'm trying to lift something really heavy. It's really annoying.
Can I give you a recommendation, Pete?
Is it don't go to the gym?
No. Well, that is a good recommendation, but also don't wear your AirPods in the toilet. I can just see a problem there. That's all I'm going to say.
That much. Anyway, I'm indifferent about AirPod Pro 2nd generation. Quite happy with my old ones, but then I am curmudgeonly and old. What else? iPhone SE 3rd generation.
Yeah, I think this
because that came out last April, didn't it? The 2nd generation one.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable that it might come out in April. It's also perfectly reasonable that it won't come out until later in the year. I think the iPhone SE is, it's a great thing.
You like it, don't you?
Well, I'm like I said, I'm not that fussed about the phone. If it makes phone calls and does the basics, I'm pretty happy with it. I don't take loads of photos with my phone or anything like that, but I recognise that I'm probably in a bit of a minority there.
Yeah, so as long as it takes phone calls and can make phone calls like the Zeiss ZX1, Oh no, that doesn't do that, does it?
It doesn't.
Okay, yeah. For your $6,000. Yeah. So what can we expect? What are the rumor mills saying we can expect in the third generation SE? Which I agree with you is a nice, modest, decent smartphone. It's got all the good bits in without the ridiculous price tag.
Yeah, I can't see a massive change for it. There's talk of moving the Touch ID to a side power button, and I guess if
Like
they
the
do
iPad
that,
Air.
you could make the chassis a bit smaller. So you could potentially have a smaller one and a larger one. There is talk of a larger iPhone SE, although it seems that most people aren't expecting it until later in the year, but it could get announced at the same time. I have to say, I'd be quite confused by the lineup at that point. If you've got small and large SE, you'll have small and large standard iPhone and then small and large Pro, won't you? Well, maybe that does make sense, actually.
Yeah, it could do. Yeah, it kind of gives you a big and little at each price point, doesn't it?
Do you remember many years ago in the UK, there was a comedy sketch show about the class divide in the UK? About how the working class looks up to the middle class, but the middle class looks down on the working class, and then the middle class looks up to the upper class, and the upper...
It does ring a bell.
Does this kind of set of iPhones, is SE working class, and the standard one is middle class, and then you've got the upper class, which is the Pro with the shiny bling. Is that what Apple's going for again?
I don't know. Maybe we should do a video or a podcast on, because we did it for the Mac lineup, and there's basically three groups of users for the Mac lineup. Maybe we should think about that and come back and do an episode on that for iPhones.
Perhaps we should.
Maybe it will be quite short. I don't know.
I think we might get into a lot of trouble. We are just talking tongue in cheek, folks, in case you haven't picked up on our dry British humour. So possibly a larger SE, possibly a smaller SE, possibly the slightly
at first,
faster.
I was with you. I thought it was a bit confusing to the lineup, but actually speaking about it probably does make sense, and it's a way of Apple to wring out a little bit more cash.
Well, it just means they get everybody, don't they? If somebody wants the larger phone, but they haven't got the money for there's an option for them. So maybe it is a good idea. And Apple aren't stupid, are they? They're quite good at making money. So
it has been said.
Which
is good, because I worry about Tim's pension otherwise.
We have spent a lot of time worrying about Tim's pension. That's why we keep contributing to it. To hope, we like to keep him topped up. We don't want him to go short.
We want to make sure you're secure, Tim, for the future. You're welcome. Yep. What else can we look forward to?
I think then we're probably looking at June then for the next actual proper event. That's usually when WWDC is. And that's obviously the developer conference, so we'd expect to focus on Mac at that point. This would be the ideal time, 1 year after the announcement of the transition to Apple Silicon, to release a new updated chip. So an M1X or an M2, perhaps?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the M1X because I think they're going to follow a similar nomenclature to what they've done with the iPad chips. And I think they're going to save M2 for the Pros, personally.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I reckon, going to put my neck on the block, I think M1X will have 4 additional performance cores. So that'll be a total of 12 cores, 4 efficiency and 8 performance. And in real terms, for heavyweight work, that should almost double the performance of the existing M1. And I would like to see double the GPU cores in there, because until Apple does that, no. I certainly think there'll be more GPU cores and possibly faster. But at the moment, it's just not there yet. And that additional GPU performance would... when we talk about the M1 versus other computers, the M1 is very fast. Everybody knows that. You've seen the videos on YouTube where it does phenomenally well in benchmarks. But where it falls short is on any GPU-intensive task. And then it shows its limits. So that's the thing that needs to be fixed. The simple reality is putting more cores in. Once they've doubled the core count, the average person isn't going to notice anything beyond that, because apps just simply won't be optimized to take care of that. I think this is an interesting point, because I ran Cinebench the other day on a Threadripper Pro computer, 32 core, 64 thread, and it's utterly astonishing watching this thing romp through this job. But of course, it's just a synthetic test that's been specifically designed to use every single thread that's available. But your average software program isn't written that way. So it doesn't mean that you can get that additional performance across the board. So I think GPU is where the focus needs to be, not CPU.
Completely agree, and I think you've made a really good point there about it doesn't matter how amazing your hardware is if your software isn't fully taking advantage of it, which is of course something Apple have been pushing with their whole Apple Silicon ecosystem. You're just not going to get it, and I wonder if at WWDC 2021 there will be a lot of focus around that, and perhaps saying, hey, look, we've got these new GPU cores. Make sure you're optimizing your code to make full use of them, because that is the key, isn't it? It's software adoption.
Yeah, and along with this as well comes the need for more memory as well. I think a lot of people have glossed over this because the M1 chip uses this unified memory architecture, so everything can access the memory. They're thinking, well, I can get away with less memory. Well, yes, you can. You can. But 8 gigabytes is still 8 gigabytes. And if your GPU needs to pull 8 gigabytes and your CPU needs to pull, where can you go?
You're in Swap City.
You're
in Swap City, as I found out when we were doing all those editing tests. As Mr. Scott from Star Trek said, I like my Star Trek references just to wind Dave up, but ye cannae change the laws of physics, and 8 gig of RAM is still 8 gig of RAM. So it will be interesting to see how Apple deals with that particular challenge, which I think they must know about. How do you get more memory? We're talking significantly more than 8 gigs, because some of the machines you can spec 16 gig, but how do you get more memory and still keep it unified and still keep it fast? It's going to be an interesting challenge, but they must be on it.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how they're going to do that. I think that's possibly a topic for another podcast. We did say we were just going to talk about the products today, and we're venturing in.
And we did say we'd try and keep it to half an hour, folks, and we are rudely at 33 minutes on my counter, but that's my fault, I expect.
So new machines at WWDC, I reckon new MacBook Pros, I think 14-inch. So I expect this to be the 13-inch redesigned a little, I say redesigned, not redesigned, with smaller bezels, like they did from the 15-inch to the 16-inch. I expect they do the same from the 13 to the 14, but only on the 4-port model. So I think there'll still be a 13 for a while. There'll be a 14 with possibly this slightly faster chip in, and 16s with an even faster version of the chip, probably more GPU cores. That would then mean that all of the mobile and consumer level machines, if the iMac has already been done, have been covered off, and that just leaves then the big iMac and the Pro machines to transition. So I think that's probably a reasonable expectation.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'm very excited. I might even consider moving to a 14, because I've been running 16s for a while now. If it feels right, might do that, because I do like my little MacBook Air, the 13-inch. It's quite nice to have something a bit lighter. Also, some rumours of an iMac Pro at this event.
Yeah, I've seen those rumours. I'm not
dubious.
Convinced. Well, I just think, what would you put in it if they're not going to announce? Yeah, the iPad Pro or the Pro machines need to be a step up. And this is, the M1X, is that enough of a step up? I suppose in benchmark terms, it probably would be pretty good. I think at the moment you can get that iMac Pro with an 18-core Xeon. I'm not sure where that bench is, but I'd have thought beyond where an M1X could get to. And, of course, it has much faster graphics cards in. So is it a Vega 64 you can get in the iMac Pro? Don't quote me on that.
Rings a bell.
Might be a 56. In any case, something that's going to be significantly more powerful than the GPU that's currently in the M1. So it seems a little bit too early to me to do that. And why would you do that before the other iMacs have been designed? And released.
Yeah, I'd be surprised. I think that's just a bit of a carefree rumour bouncing around. We'll wait and see.
I will
Exciting.
say,
Yeah.
on our business purchasing site for Apple, there are incredibly long wait times on the small iMac and on the iMac Pro. Last time I checked, which would usually indicate that something new is coming. So it could be possible, or it could also mean that they're just quietly retiring the iMac Pro for now.
But that's an interesting insight, and that for me makes it more likely, because we don't just base things on hearsay. A little tidbit like that, and thank you for that, might make the difference. Who knows? Maybe they'll throw it in at the end when we think it's all done. They'll throw it in and say, "But that's not all, folks."
Perhaps. Well, I come back to what is the difference between the iMac Pro and the iMac 5K? Well, there's 2 extra Thunderbolt ports, and it's got Pro gearing, so it's Xeon processor and ECC RAM, although it's using a consumer grade GPU. So if they haven't got a Pro Apple Silicon chip, with error check-in RAM support, then what actually is going to differentiate it?
Well, maybe you're on the nail with the rumours of the new iMac Pro, because people are putting 2 and 2 together and saying, well, we're seeing the iMac Pro, perhaps evidence of that being quietly retired, therefore there must be a new iMac Pro. But it may be that they're saying, actually, this, as we've said for a while, it's kind of the black sheep of the lineup. It doesn't really fit anywhere. So it may be that they're just retiring it, and they're going to say, look, the top of the range M1X iMac, whatever that might be, will trump this. Who knows? We'll just have to wait and see.
Okay, well, we'll see whether or not we're right. This is a bit far away yet. I'm sure we'll get better quality information nearer to the time, and we'll talk about that as the
From
time
our
comes.
sources and spies.
Indeed. What about the new chargers, Pete?
Oh, you mean the gallium nitride ones instead of the silicon ones?
Yeah, so basically what it means is you can have the same kind of power output for a smaller size. So you can make all your chargers smaller.
Yeah. And what would you do with your old one?
Well, that is a question, isn't it?
Because I have to say, one of the things that I've never really sort of thought was a real problem in my life, and I move about a lot, so if it's going to be a problem for someone, it's going to be a problem for someone like me. I never think, do you know what, this charger's really, really bulky. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd be happy if it was smaller, but it's not a big problem in my life.
Not the Apple chargers. I've had some, pretty large bricks with PC laptops and things. But like you say, nice to have a smaller one, and it's nice that things are moving on. But what Apple have just been saying about let's not put a charger in the box with our phones, and although that's kind of fallen on its face in a couple of different countries where they've been forced to include a charger. But what do you do with your old charger? Well, we're supposed to be reusing all our old chargers, but what will happen if Apple make a new shiny thing? The Apple sheep will go and buy it, will they not? And throw away their old one.
Of course they will. I came across, I almost caught myself doing it the other day. I came across an old iPad charger, the slightly chunkier ones, which I always used to use to charge my iPhone because it's higher ampage, so it charged quicker. And I looked at it and thought, should I just chuck that away? I thought, no, there's nothing wrong with it. But it's very easy to think, because it's not the shiniest, newest, and we're talking about a charger here, folks. It's not something that is massively on show. I don't think it's sending the right message. Although I have to say, gallium nitride does sound very good. It sounds like a transformer, doesn't it? My name is gallium nitride. But yeah.
Okay. I've got to be honest, Pete. Your future in voiceover work is probably not as promising as you'd hoped. But
I disagree. Everyone loves me.
Okay.
The British Carl Sagan was that one comment I saw that time. I'm hanging on to that.
That is just, literally one comment out of how many thousands of views. It's good.
I love it.
So let's talk about another rumoured product. Only going to talk briefly, but Apple Car. It's a long way off yet. but
Yeah.
Hyundai seemed to drop a ball on this one.
Yeah, and then immediately backtrack.
Yeah. But
I mean, it's not a surprise, is it?
no.
We've heard whispers of it for a number of years, and when you look at where the vehicle market's going with electric vehicles, I mean, we do work in the automotive industry a bit with our agency, and electric vehicles, EVs, is where it's going, and obviously Tesla have trailblazed the way there. Elon Musk just become the richest person on the planet, partly because of the increase in Tesla shares, but it's not really a surprise that Apple won't want in on that.
Well, Tesla behave a lot like Apple with their corporate strategy and their obstructiveness to repair. And there's a lot of things. It's one of those things where I like the product, but I don't like the company. You know,
Yeah.
it's the same with all the Apple stuff. I don't like Apple as a company, but I like some of their products. Well, you know, Tesla cars they're cool, but
They're cool. You were about to say they look cool and then caught yourself. And I don't want to dwell too long on this, but I disagree with people who say that Teslas look cool. They do not. They have no style. They do not look good.
they're too
They are a
big.
very
as well.
cool concept, but they do not look good. They look dated.
The Model S in particular looks too big on British roads. It's too wide.
Change my mind.
Anyway, so
Does the world need an Apple car though, Dave? What's your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I think the world needs an Apple car like I need a hemorrhoid. And that is to say, not.
You're probably going to get one,
probably going to get
and
one.
you'll probably have to deal with it. But not everyone wants to see it.
This podcast has degenerated. We've had piles of fun today, that's for sure. So I think it's time to draw a line under that and move on.
Yeah.
Next week we are going to talk about the M1 chip, and I think I'm ready, Pete, to give my final verdict on M1.
Ooh.
So
Yeah, I'd be interested to see that. And I think we've talked a lot about M1 and Apple Silicon over the last few months, and I think our viewers have enjoyed that. But perhaps we're getting to the point where we need to start talking about other things.
Well, possibly. We certainly need to come to a definitive conclusion on it. And I think I'm there with it. I think I know how I feel about it and where it sits. In fact, I've made some purchase decisions of late around M1, so perhaps we can weave that into the conversation as well.
Excellent. That sounds intriguing. I look forward to that.
Good. So thanks to everybody for listening in. And if you're watching us on YouTube, then you'll be watching on the new Constant Geekery podcast channel, which doesn't have its own URL yet. So if you want to find us on YouTube, you'll have to go to youtube.com/Constant Geekery, follow the link there to the podcast channel and get subscribed. Thanks to everyone who did get subscribed. Get my words out in a minute, straight away. Do appreciate that.
Thank you for that. Really good.
I do expect that we'll be down on views and listeners for a while. But that's just the nature of the beast. And we're going to shoot a trailer in a moment, which will go on the main Constant Geekery channel, and we will just explain why we've moved the podcast. So if you're curious about that, then you can go and watch that. Our plan is to release one every week. I can't guarantee we'll always achieve that, but we'll certainly do our best to try.
Yeah, and hopefully, as soon as this pesky lockdown or restrictions, whatever we're told to do by the government, as soon as those are relaxed and we can get back together, you'll get to see the new Constant Geekery podcast studio layout that we've worked very hard on in our heads. We haven't been able to put it together yet because we've not been able to be together, but we will be doing that, and it's very frustrating that we're back in lockdown land, but here we are, and thank you for tuning in.
Yeah. It is very... we hope to start the new year with a bang, new channel and a new set and everything. But there we go. We do need to obey the law and follow the guidance we're being given. It's really important that everybody does that so that we can all stay safe and get out of this sooner rather than later. So, indeed, stay safe, everybody, and we'll see you next time on the Constant Geekery podcast.
Cheerio.